I'm John Sperling, and I'd like to welcome you tonight to the ASCS Practice Management webinar series. We're very fortunate to have an important topic tonight, being academic in private practice. And I'd like to thank Dr. Patrick Dennard for organizing this session. We've brought together a great number of experts to chat about this interesting topic. Before we get started, we'd like to thank Smith & Nephew for helping to sponsor this event. I think with that, we're going to, Steve, if you have a brief video that you can please play.
At Smith & Nephew, we strive to put solutions in your hands that can allow your patients to live a life unlimited, and the shoulder space is no different. Here at Smith & Nephew, our focus is on providing you options throughout your patient's continuum of care with cutting-edge products like Regeneten, a bioinductive implant that redefines biologic healing for rotator cuff tendon growth, and the new ATOS shoulder system starring the ATOS Metastem that allows for maximized stability and an elevated surgical experience with an efficient system to help simplify shoulder surgery. We are honored to support the ASDS Foundation, and it is our mission to continue to provide you with the most innovative solutions in the shoulder to help restore the patient's ability to live their life unlimited.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephen. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Dennard, who's arranged a very nice roundtable discussion for us tonight on this important topic. Pat, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, John, thanks for inviting us to do this. So we have an excellent all-star panel to talk about private practice. We're going to do all roundtable discussion and how we integrate academics and research into all our practices. So we have Andy Jawa from Boston, John Levy from Florida, and Rob Hartzler from San Antonio, Texas. All these individuals I have a huge amount of respect for. They really get it done in private practice, both clinically, doing excellent work, and academically. So we're going to start off and I want to ask you guys about the why. And Andy, I'll start with you. I just want to hear, why do you do research in private practice? What's the value to you?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would just say is I love it. I enjoy it. But why do I enjoy it? So I think it helps me really understand how I can improve care, how I can make patients better. I want to get better at my craft. So knowing the answers to what I do well and what I do wrong, and makes me do a better job. I think the second reason is collaboration. It's actually pretty social. I love working with John Levy. I love working with Pat Dennard. I love writing papers with you guys, other surgeons, fellows. I get fellows involved. I get med students involved, and I get people trying to get to medical school. So you feel like you're paying it forward a little bit. And then, very honestly, at some point, there is a little bit of ego. It's nice to be recognized. And it's nice to see your name in print. That's lower on the scale, but I'd be disingenuous if I didn't say that. It's nice to be an expert. So those are my three main reasons.
Yeah, I think it's an honest answer. I mean, all those feed into us, right? Having purpose and value. John, how about you?
Yeah, I think Andy brings up some really good points there. It's funny. I remember when I was a med student. Sorry, I was a resident, and I was with John Uribe, and I started talking to John Uribe. He was one of my mentors back in the day, and I looked at him. I said, you publish a lot of research. Don't you think this is like a phenomenal way to advertise what you do? And he looked at me. He's like, "You're crazy." He's like, "It's not what we do." And I'm like, "Well, kind of. At some level, it is. You're advertising." The best form of advertising who you are and what you've accomplished is your research. And it's not the primary reason I do it, but it kind of piggybacks into that ego portion that Andy, I think, is hinting to. I think what drives me to do research is so much of what I pay attention to in research is trying to understand the patient experience. I think we all have, we look at, okay, a shoulder replacement should do well because it's got good outcomes. What does that really mean, and what does it mean to the patient? And so much of what I've really focused my efforts on the clinical side of research is trying to answer those questions. What is it like to do well? How long does it take to get better? What are the things you can do when you achieve what you think is a good result? And we're trying to sort of just fine tune and better understand what we do. And so that drives me so that I can go to my patients and say, here is what you can expect, and it comes from my own patient experience that I've looked at and I'm honest about. And I think what research does, and probably drives all of us on this call, is truly being honest about what we do. And honestly, if something works, we're being honest about it. And if it doesn't work, be honest that it doesn't work and move on. And that's how you change the field. That's how you move the field. And we want to be the people who define the field And I think that is, whether it's ego or not, like that's kind of what drives all of us into this realm, because we want to, like, we don't want to wait for the evidence-based practices to dictate what we do. We want to make the evidence that drives the care that we give.
I think it's interesting what you just said too about the patient stuff, because I find the same thing, that when I tell a patient what my data is, it's very, it produces a lot of confidence for them and helps you in private practice. It helps you in any setting, but in private practice, I actually think it's a huge benefit. How about you? You did fellowship, obviously, Mark Frankel. Did that influence your decision to go?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed research before, but I went to University of Miami. Man, it was hard to do research. Like, I remember going to the bowels of the U and trying to find charts, and they had 3 words on them. And I'm like, come on, you can't do research. There's no way we're going to do it this way. So I found ways to just do research. And when I walked into what Mark Frankel had, all of a sudden, like, research was hard when I was a resident. It was a piece of cake when you have a team. And so modeling that, absolutely, because you follow your mentor's footsteps. So I absolutely modeled my drive in creating a research department around what Frankel had created, just to make research easy, because I wanted all my fellows, whoever it wasn't fellows at the time, but I wanted people who ended up working with me to realize that research is easy. It's not a pain in the butt, and here are the fruits of what you get from it.
Absolutely. Rob, how about you? You trained with 2 private practice guys, and Mark Frankel and Steve Burkhart. So you saw, this in 2 different settings.
Yeah, I mean, you're so much of what you are in life is being shaped by your mentors and where you're trained. So Burkhart and Frankel definitely modeled that for me, being surgeons involved in academic practice in a pure private practice setting. Certainly, I'm looking at Dr. Sperling here on the side cam and just reflecting about being at the Mayo Clinic for residency, and it's almost like, if you train for your residency at Mayo, there's the 3 shields: patient care, education, research, and you kind of feel like you're not, a complete Mayo surgeon if you're not doing academic practice. And obviously not every resident who goes into private practice does that, but it's kind of this nagging idea in your head, and it drives you forward. Dr. Burkhart always said, you really magnify your impact on the world by doing academic activity, and we all want to be, having meaningful lives and, make an impact on the world. And so if you're doing clinical practice, you're obviously doing a tremendous amount of good, helping patient by patient. But if you train another surgeon or have an idea that other surgeons use, or do research that's meaningful, then your impact is really magnified in that way. So I think all of that stuff drives me, and nobody said it's a love-hate relationship yet, so I'll just say that. And I think probably we've all felt like we'd have a lot better life if we just got rid of it many times, the academic parts of the practice, because it is a burden and it takes a lot of your energy away that you could be doing other things, time with your family or other pursuits, or even just taking away a little bit of energy from your clinical practice. So, but I think if you don't love it, like Andy said, if you don't love it in a certain way and have that kind of internal motivation be driving you, then you're not going to be successful at it, and you're certainly not going to have staying power as a part of your career.
Well, let's get into some of those things then you're talking about. Let's talk about the how. I want to hear kind of what each of your journey was in research. Did you go into an established setting? Did you build it from a ground floor? So Andy, how about you take it away first?
Yeah, so my background is actually unique. So very similar to you guys, I trained at Mass General, Harvard, and did 2 fellowships, one with Jesse Jupiter and one with JP. So extremely academic. And so just like Rob was talking about, you feel like, I have to do research. And I actually started so I went to Boston Medical Center, which is this sort of urban hospital, lots of trauma. And my original goal was to be an upper extremity trauma surgeon, and do international medicine and do research along the way. And so I was at BMC, and BMC is great. I've learned a ton there surgically. I learned how to be a surgeon there, but trying to do research was really hard. It's exactly like what John talked about. The data was hard. You couldn't like give iPads to patients. They would be gone instantaneously. Like it was hard. And I'll be very honest, I had a lot of trouble breaking into hand doing research there. I definitely think there's a little bit of knowing some people to try and get into it. So that was hard. And then this opportunity opened up. And I think life is a little bit serendipitous where this private practice said, hey, we need somebody to do open shoulder, elbow hand. And after 5 years, I basically was like, this is really interesting. And so I went there. It was a private practice job. And but I really started doing shoulder arthroplasty. And as I started getting good at shoulder arthroplasty, volume just kept picking up. And I was like, I love this. I love that patients are doing well. And then at some point I was like, I need to start recording my patients. So I literally had an Excel spreadsheet of all my patients and kept, ASCS scores. And eventually I made some hard decisions. And these are some of the things that you get to later. I was like, look, I like this. And then getting to personal life, we're 2-physician family. My wife's an ICU doc. I was like, I can do research in this if I just do shoulder arthroplasty. I could create a great database. I can be at home when I want to. This could be predictable. But the downside was I felt kind of lame. I wasn't doing all this other stuff I trained to do. I have people like you guys who are doing a gazillion things and who are amazing surgeons. So I made a conscious choice. I also made a conscious choice to make a little less money just to do arthroplasty. But to create a database that I could do research, I hired a research assistant who is somebody who wanted to get into med school. And she was great. And she led to another research assistant. And then it just kept building on each other. And then fellows. And long story short, it just kind of built on each other. I paid for it out of my pocket. I took a hit at first.
Ask that, how you paid for it out of pocket. So you came up with a salary of 50 to 75K or something, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was less, to be honest. I didn't choose someone who was going to be permanent. I chose somebody who wanted to get a med school. It's a 1-year thing. So that's sort of the journey of how it happened. It was serendipitous, but I made some decisions along the way, paying out of pocket.
How long did it take you till you felt like you were kind of dialed in, it was running well and everything?
It probably took about 4 to 5 years because you start collecting data and you actually don't get any good data for a minimum of 3 years, right? So you need 2-year follow-up. I remember my first publication, I was like, all right, when will we have 100 patients with 2-year follow-up? And then it's amazing, once you get beyond that threshold, it's logarithmic. It's just exponential is a better word. You could just keep going and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're like, hey, I observe this. And you get better at your craft. And you're like, I notice, I see this. And I see these patients every day. And so you make observations. And so that's sort of how it started. But three years.
Yeah, I tell people when they're talking about just practice management, building the practice you want, it's an investment. This sounds like the same thing you're saying. You put in the time and then it starts paying off, just like putting money in a retirement account at an early age, right? John, how about you? You started hospital employed, right? And then transition to private practice, different experiences, how they compare and what, how you manage that?
I mean, I think that, I was really fortunate. I had a very good experience as a hospital employment model. I mean, technically I'm hospital employed technically still. So that hasn't changed. It's just different. It's more of a true private practice model. I can get to that. But the first 16 years of my career, I was at Holy Cross Hospital. It was the first job I ever had. And I collected data from day one. I literally took the forms that Mark Frankel had. They were on paper. And every one of my patients filled out forms. Literally every new patient filled out a form. It was the only way I could control it. And it was exhausting. And it all sat in patient charts. And it was really unorganized. And to do any research was very, very tedious. And so I started practice in 2006. 2010, I said, this has got to we have to automate this in a better way. And I started, it was in 2010 that a couple of things happened. First, I actually wrote a business plan and presented it to Holy Cross Hospital. And it was literally a year before that Holy Cross had gotten like a $2 million research grant for cardiovascular health, or maybe it was more. It might have been a $20 million research. It was a big number. And so it was really fresh on the CEO's mind that, yeah, research can be a really good opportunity to get donor funds. And so when I presented literally a 10-page business plan to the CEO, I said, here's what I'd like. I want to create a research. Here are my needs. I need a location, meaning give me an office. I need you to hire one research assistant. And that's all I'm asking. And then here's my 5-year plan beyond that. And I kind of did the cost analysis and everything. And I presented to the CEO, and the CEO said, great idea. So that started the research department. And within a year, we started looking for who would be a good partner to develop a web-based data collection system. And I ended up partnering with CareSense. It's not like I don't have any financial disclosures related to CareSense at all. They're owned by MedTrack. But Charlie Giametti has been working with me to this day. I have weekly meetings with him still to this day, just to talk about what we could do to make the database even better. Where can we tweak it, and how can we integrate it into Athena, which is our EMR? How can we create care pathways so that patients get text message reminders through the course of care? So it's a constant work relationship that I have with the database company. We launched that database in 2012. I literally paid a researcher to go back and take all of the patients I operated on and all their charts and type it in. And it took 6 months to download that, to hand drop in that data. We even published a paper on the accuracy of data when you do it versus an iPad versus do it handwritten. And it was like a 40% of patients didn't complete the forms and 100% did on an iPad. And it certainly gives you better data. But I would say from the day I started practice, and this is a hard message, I created a culture in my practice that research matters. So, if a patient tried to leave the office and they didn't get their forms, I had the MA run back out, grab them, and say, "Oh, you didn't finish your forms," and convince the patients that it was important for kind of the betterment of helping others. And that culture has to stand, because it's really easy when you run an hour behind to say, "Oh man, we forgot that iPad. How are we going to tell them? How are we going to tell a patient to go back and actually answer 100 questions?" But you have to create that culture in your practice. I did it from the beginning, and every new person that got added in my practice over 16 years, they knew that was important to me.
Yeah, and again, I think once the patients, they hear that it's important, they get it, and it actually just elevates their opinion of you and their sense of care. Rob, how about you? You guys have a private practice that's pretty, to my knowledge, they're pretty strict on you and metrics, measuring you all the time, your productivity. How do you balance research in that environment, advocate for performing research? Because you kind of touched on
so we have a traditional private practice, 100% physician owned. We've been fortunate, very visionary administrators, and Dr. Burkhart was a big part of that on owning ancillaries. And so that's part of that affords us a little bit of a luxury to, surgeons who choose to do so have a little bit more bandwidth for, spending time and energy on doing research. We actually have tried to incentivize it through, we have a scorecard that has some bearing on our ownership and the group. And so you can get points on the scorecard for doing academic activities. And that's not just, the kind of things we've been talking about, publishing papers and things, but educational activities and things of that nature, academic things. So in that way, I really have a great environment, because the practice has said that we value these activities. We think that it's important, and to some extent feeds back in potentially to marketing and prestige of the practice and things like that. So I'm very supported in that, in that way. That motivating academic activities through a mechanism like our scorecard, I think, has been more of a theoretical venture. I haven't seen that be a real motivator for people who wouldn't otherwise be motivated to do it. So I think it's been a theoretical, also, like, recruiting tool for us. We haven't recruited, the next real ambitious private academician. But hopefully over time we will use that to recruit more surgeons. But I think it goes back a little bit to just, it has to be an intrinsic motivation, but we have laid out the infrastructure for it to matter, from a local practice standpoint in the ways that I've been describing. I'd go back to, we also have, so our group decided to create a 501c3, an entity that could be a mechanism for funding research, education activities, academic things. So all of the physicians contribute to that. And so we've hired a research manager, research coordinators, and, can fund IRB applications and statistical work and publishing fees and all of that kind of thing, all of those kind of things through that. So that also, is helpful. And if you're not, if you don't have, like John said, if you don't have a team, if you don't have infrastructure in the way that everyone's been describing, it's really hard to, to do it on your own. I got a lot of benefit out of Arthrex's SOS system. We actually integrated that into our EMR when that was active, and that was tremendously beneficial. So we've had to try to, since that has been shut down, we've had to try to, figure out how to do electronic databasing again. And I've gone back to paper forms, which is just super annoying. And as John said, not very effective. So it's all just hard. And
so who pays for the coordinator? Because do you pay for it? Is the group?
We all contribute. Every physician that's a full member of the group contributes every month into the 501, into Brio, or that organization.
So you all contribute a percentage or a fixed amount or something.
A fixed amount. Yep.
Yeah. Andy, how about you? How do you fund currently? You talked about the initial person that you just paid. How do you do that now? Do you have a 50?
So we created a foundation about 2 years ago, thinking we'd get donations from patients, and we haven't got much. We pay into it, but what has really helped though is we have created this program for MA. So medical assistants. So people getting to medical school now is ridiculous, and people take a lot of time off. And the first research assistant I had wanted to go to medical school, and she was doing this, and I was like, and she asked me, "Can I do some research?" I was like, "This is perfect." And so I sort of paid her out of my pocket. But then what's interesting is then other MAs were like, hey, can I do that? And then all of a sudden, she was awesome. And she was really resourceful. She's like, you know what? We could recruit people I went to Hamilton. I didn't go to Hamilton, but this person did. She's like, let's get this stream from Hamilton College. And so then it started building this program. Now we employ 20 medical assistants funded through this 501c3 because they all want to do research. They all want to get into medical school. And what's really great about them, not all of them are through the 501c3, but people who do research. What's great about them as opposed to someone who's with you year in, year out, is they're hungry. They want to publish as much as they can, and they're super smart. And I screen out for people who are good writers. So what has made this less painful for me, Rob, is they write, I edit. If I'm writing a paper nowadays, that's not a good thing. That means I'm reworking a paper that I'm like, I can't get through. So I've become an editor and not a writer. I come up with ideas and I collect the data. And then going to Levy's point, culture. Everybody has to get the iPad. It's worked into it. And then the last point that I wanted to make is I give a booklet to every patient, 60 pages long, how do you get through your total shoulder? And the last 10, 15 pages is data. It's these are the complications. This is what can happen. And so I talk about in their visit, they watch a video. So everything is reinforced. So they know what can happen. They're like, oh, I think I might have a stress fracture. So they call in and we're like, go back into a sling. So they're totally in tune, and it all kind of works symbiotically.
That's awesome. All that I give it like a 20-page packet. I thought mine was long. I got to step up my game. John, how about you? Does the hospital pay for it now?
No, not now. So at Holy Cross, they did. The research
Yep.
department was
Yep.
funded by the hospital. It was great. It's interesting on the incentive. We even put in our co-management to try to get people to do research. We had a fully funded research team. I had 15 physicians, and it was basically myself and Martin Roche, and occasionally someone else that would do some research. So really get back to that, like you have to have the drive, even if you create all the incentives. Currently, since I started over at Paley, I fund the research. I mean, I fund a full-time clinical research associate. Right around 2010, 2011 is when we first had our first sort of gap year research fellow. And we've had a research fellowship since then. Every year we have one research fellow. It's a funded fellowship. So currently I fund that fellowship. So I fully fund research. It gets offset a little bit by grants and some of the FDA trials we do. But I mean, net is a financial loss for me. But it's important to me, and it's not something I'm planning on giving up. And maybe one day we'll have enough grants to support it. But to me, it's cost of business. It is part of who I am. It is part of what's important to me. And if it to me, it's just another added expense. But right now, I'm covering it, and maybe one day I'll get sophisticated enough to create a non-for-profit and have a big donor that will kind of endow it. That'll be great. But those are hard to. Orthopedics is not a place where you see a lot of big donors unless you literally change someone's life in a dramatic way. And then you have to like convince them that they want to give money. So you either have people who are really philanthropic and you have a network there. Paley is amazing at philanthropy. They have the Unlimited Foundation. They do amazing things, but they're also taking care of pediatric deformities. It's a little bit different than, giving a person a shoulder replacement.
How do you get the clinical fellows or the research fellows to come? Do you advertise that or?
OrthoGate. It's literally the only place you can do it. OrthoGate it's almost like a forgotten platform, but it does have and I think most research fellowships do advertise. It's not even advertise. You just post. You post around that time. You post right around match, because there's a week before match. Those that didn't match will know, and that week is like the wild west. I mean, literally, and pretty much, I'd say probably 70% of the time that I've matched a fellow, I've lost them because they found the spot. And I always say, oh, you hit your goal. My goal is to try to get you into orthopedic residency. If you hit that goal before I even start, then you have to take it. It's disappointing for us, but it's the right thing for them. But we've had a great mentorship group. And even the research fellows, they stay in touch with each other. It's kind of created a very important mentor model in my career. It's amazing. I said, some of my earliest research fellows are now, they finished their shoulder and elbow fellowship, which is awesome. Like to see them go through that whole process, still love what we do, and then go and create a career out of it. That's amazing. I mean, you guys get it with residents and stuff like that. I don't. I've only trained fellows and research fellows. So. Right now, it's $40,000 is what we pay. It's $40,000, no benefits, but it gives them, enough to kind of keep their year going. So they're not, it's not cheap to live in South Florida, but it's not outrageous either. It's not like living in New York City.
And what's your opinion on US grads versus international grads in this regard? Because you get a lot of requests from people who want to come internationally and do research.
Tons. For me, this is an interview that we interview each other. I need to know that I can get you to the next level. And I've learned, there's something I can get to the next level easy and some that are going to be really tough. And unfortunate reality, if you got really crappy board scores, you don't get through the screen unless you have something else. And it's really hard. So that unfortunately screens people out really quickly when it comes to that. And, I have a phenomenal research fellow right now. He came from Tufts. He should have matched. I mean, it's my fortunate experience to find him, his unfortunate experience to not have matched, but he should have matched. He interviewed like 10, 11 places. He literally slipped through the cracks and he landed with us, and I'm confident he'll get in. I've had the flip side where people had low board scores and it was tough, but at the end of the day, I've had a pretty good track record at getting people where they want to be.
Mm-hmm. Andy, how about you? Do you do fellows internationally, research fellows, or you're just primarily using the people who want to go to medical school? It sounds like you're starting a little bit early.
Yeah, I mean, I found the people going to medical school are really quite gifted. These people, they don't necessarily go into orthopedics, but a lot of them are sort of the cream of the crop because they haven't been sort of, rejected from residency. And these guys are just really hungry. And I hate to say it, but what I do, like shoulder arthroplasty, you guys do a lot of stuff. Like, it's not that hard. Like, they read like 20 papers and they're like, I get it. Arthritis, rotator cuff. Like, they become experts in this very quickly and they can pick it up. They know more than my fellows by like 4 months in terms of like shoulder stuff, arthroplasty. So it's served really well. We pay about 40,000 with benefits. And it's fun having them around. I'll be very honest. And, I'll pay for them to go to like New England Shoulder Elbow and like I pay for their lunch every day. And like, so,
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. What about clinical fellows then on the, more just operating side, the integrated with research? Rob, do you guys still have clinical fellows?
Yeah, we, I'm in partnership with Rockwood's Fellowship with UT Health in San Antonio. So it's funny because, there's like an inverse correlation between, for me and my experience, it's like an inverse correlation between capability for really executing on research and motivation. Like for me, the typical clinical fellow is like, they just want to get out there. They want to learn how to do surgery, do a great clinical practice and get out and start practicing. They're not very motivated. And then the medical students are like Andy said, ultra excited, super motivated. They really have to get things done, but have a lower skill set for actually accomplishing that. And so anyway, it's tricky managing each one of those kind of different levels of in training and skill set and motivation. And for me, it's always been kind of an organic, the fellows aside, medical students and residents has always been sort of an organic thing. We don't have a formal research fellowship, just people in training in San Antonio, if they find out about us or whatever, they come around and, whatever their motivation leads them to accomplish, we have the milieu that they can be successful in doing that. So I think I'm probably the least organized in terms of facilitating that out of everybody.
What about remote versus in person? Do any of you guys, like, I'm sure people reach out to you and say, hey, I want to do papers with you, that kind of thing. John, I saw you shake your head.
Yeah, I mean, I had one yesterday. I mean, it literally happens very frequently. It's really hard to do remote, and that's just because of HPI. I mean, patient health information. You just have to be protected, and it's so important to not create any breaches along that. That for the longest time, I have a whole volunteer network of people who are in FAU, some of the local med students that want to do a project or two. They have the summer off, etc. And I always welcome them. The screening tool that we use is you have to become a volunteer. If you're a volunteer within the institution, then you've gone through at least one hoop to try to get through. You show a little bit more commitment. And once you're in the volunteer status, then it gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of looking at patient health information. But you got to do it on site. Taking data home is too dangerous. And so we do everything on site. We don't let people take data home. And it's really difficult to do projects that involve patient health information from remote. Case reports, videos, stuff like that, that's a different story. You can protect that pretty easily, but not when it comes to large groups of data.
Yeah, and even then, it's like you're spending so much time trying to explain it in another venue versus just making it fluid and part of your practice. I find it really hard. I've stopped doing it personally. How about
the IMG question I've been really vexed by over the years, because that is almost an impossible task, to match into orthopedics if you're an IMG. One of the students that worked with us last year texted me this. I'm not sure. Oh, this says source in RMP, so maybe it's accurate. IMG match in orthopedic surgery, 97 publications, abstracts, presentations. So it's like almost, that's like an impossible task almost to generate that amount of academic productivity. And so I'm not sure whether it's not the best thing for most IMGs to like try to do, if they want to get into the US system, to do do orthopedic surgery in their home country and then try to get in through the fellowship system. I mean, it's almost impossible to match in orthopedics as a US medical student. Now you have to have such a good CV and track record. So it's really tough to know what to tell those people, you know, when they inquire about doing research. I don't know what everybody else's opinion about that is.
I had a guy last year, spent 2 years with me, born in the US, but did medical school in Guatemala, over something like 35 publications in the 20 months. Good guy, very high scores, 250 didn't match. It's very
So
challenging.
we've had three foreign med grads that have all matched in orthopedics, and
Okay.
it is a testimony to some of the most dedicated, hardworking, resilient guys and gals actually that I've ever worked with. The ones who will be successful don't give up, and it can take them 5 years of research to get there. But they do it. I mean, I'm literally. I mean, there's someone doing a shoulder and elbow fellowship this year who was one of my research fellows, and she crushed it. She is the definition of resilience. She is grit all over, and took her a long
John,
time. But
do you
she's dedicated.
tell
She had
do you
passion
tell
about it. She got there.
do you tell the IMGs like this is a 3 to 5 year commitment or something like that? I mean, do you give them a time frame or a number of publications, presentations that they're shooting for to be competitive? How do you manage?
I don't know the answer to that, to be honest. It was early in it was my first few research fellows. When I didn't know how to, like, now I screen research fellows because I know that that's a hard, long path, and I want to get you there as quick as possible. So I end up screening out a lot of those IMGs today. But in terms of giving, like, I don't ever think of destroying the hope of them and their dreams of making it happen, because I've seen it happen. But it's hard to give a number, and I just know that it can take a very long time. And there are some research tracks that are not in shoulder and elbow, but they're in certain institutions where if you do a 2-year commitment, you are almost get a solid, strong look and a decent chance to matching into that residency. And there are some around the country that are known for that, and they get discussed amongst those that are doing research gap years. And you kind of have to get into it. It's a luxury to get into one of those, but that can get you there. And we've had three, four med grads there, typically US that let's see, 2 are US that did a Caribbean medical school, and then one that actually did medical school in Colombia, as in the country. And they made it. It took a long time, but they're dedicated and they're passionate, and they're going to be phenomenal. They'll probably end up being extraordinarily academic because of it, because it's really defined their career and how they got there.
Yeah. How about time management? Rob kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. Andy, you kind of give a little insight as well, trying to narrow it down. How do you make time for it? Maybe how that's changed over time and what practical advice you have?
Yeah. So unlike you guys, I don't know Rob so much, but Pat and John, I know you guys are just like, you get stuff done. I am like not efficient in getting stuff done. Like, I don't wake up at 4 a.m. and work out. I love sleeping. I'm very inefficient. I love chatting a lot. And so I don't have research meetings like every week at 6 a.m. I incorporate it into my day. Like, I'm in clinic, and my clinics aren't tough. They're pretty like shoulder replacement, follow up, shoulder replacement. And so they have to come get me. I screen for people who are resourceful. I'm like, all right, do this, come back. And they may get it wrong. And then I'll like, do this, come back. They send me papers. I edit them like in between patients, and like, I have to incorporate it in my day. Mm-hmm. If I come home and do work, that is not good. That does not work well in this. Webinars generally don't work well in this family, but to get it done at work is the gist. And so I think Levy said it right. It has to be part of the culture. I get to work and I'm doing research. I'm taking care of patients. It's all part of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're managing your time effectively because you're integrating it and not leaving a lot of gaps. That sounds like John.
That's right. But I can't, I'm not like you guys. I'm like, you guys are amazing.
John, what are your tips?
Yeah, I mean, I do have regular research meetings. That goes back to the Frankel model where he had weekly meetings. I have them every other week. Gives
Yep.
time to kind of, they're just like, they're like 45-minute updates. And now that I have a 45-minute drive to work, it happens on my drive to work. So it's now a Zoom call. So I'm trying to integrate it into my day. But I think that kind of keeps the cadence of things. It keeps accountability going forward so that projects don't get lost. So I do think it's important. And I don't know that we accomplish a huge amount in each research meeting other than just updates. And then in between those 2 weeks is when we do a lot of the real data mining and reviews. And, I kind of have a cadence where my research fellow writes the paper, my clinical fellow edits it, and then it comes to me. So I get a closer to a finished product most of the time. We have
That's
discussions,
exactly what I do.
along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the where I write the most are when I'm traveling. Like, yeah, it's hard for me to do it during the week, but if I'm like, I like flying. Even if I go to Tampa, I'll fly, even though it's the half-hour flight, because that'll put me in a place where I can actually sit down for an hour in a concentrated moment with nobody else around me, and I can get this stuff done. So my fellows all know that if I've got a flight, like, give me 2 or 3 things to work on and I'll get it done on the flight. And so that's where I kind of do my best time management is during travel times.
And I had one point related to that is I love just thinking about research all the time. And like, I like to be in the shower and be like, great idea. And so like my research assistants know, I'll just send off emails on like a Saturday at like 6 a.m. and be like, let's do this, this, and this. And like, if you're really into a project, you get jazzed up, and it's kind of like a 24-hour job, but it's just fun. I don't know if you guys have that same experience. I guess not.
No, I'm fully with you. I mean, my team always makes fun of me the hours I send emails, because you get a lot of excitement out of it, right? Once you start doing it, you get that positive reinforcement, and then you're making contributions. You just want to keep going. It feels good. And I think it's it all kind of goes together, right? Like, it sounds, sometimes people look at what we do and they're like, you're crazy. How do you do all that? But actually it starts really moving because you, just like John said, I, travel, do my papers that say sent to me by Thursday because I'm on the plane, it's all working together, and I'm doing it, just integrate it into life, and it all kind of works out,
Yeah, it's exciting. So one little tip that I did years ago, there's an app. We all like to look at apps. I'm not on social media. Maybe I look at LinkedIn from time to time, but I'm not on Instagram or anything like that. But I do have the PubMed app. And if you have a PubMed app and you type in shoulder, then you literally get a daily list of their abstracts. And it's not because you're not reading JBJS and JSCS. It's all these random Brazilian but they have ideas. They have great ideas. Like, some of the things you're like, oh, that makes a whole lot of sense. And all of a sudden, boom, you have an idea, and you forward and pass it off to your research fellow. You'd be like, let's do something around this this looks interesting. Let's see how we can tweak this and turn it into a paper. We have a much better bigger data set. Let's look at that. I can't tell you how many times that has generated just ideas. Research is all about having that idea, which very rarely is truly unique. Most of our ideas are recycled and just modified and tweaked. And so what is going to spur the interest? It's like Java said, you might have that idea, but it comes from somewhere. So you always are looking for the stimulation of getting your ideas. A lot of us do it at meetings, but a lot of times it just happens just because you read an article, you had some other person give you an idea about something. So whatever it does, keeping track of it and bringing the team together with a new idea. We spitball all the time. I'd say most of our research meetings are, as we talk about one topic, boom, we have another idea, someone writes it down, and the next day I've got some data on it, and we see what it looks like.
Yeah, I like that tip on reading. I mean, I hear people all the time say, how do you come up with ideas? And just like you're talking about, you're just flowing off of other things, and it actually isn't that hard. Rob, personal life, I know you.
Yeah.
You got other interests besides research. How do you got kids? How many?
Yeah, we've got 4. And when they were real little, I'm the youngest one here, obviously. So I'm in my 10th year of practice now. When they were real little on the kid family front, it was a lot easier because they didn't really notice, if you were gone. But over the last few years, yeah, I mean,
awesome.
I've started to get a lot more eye rolling, when it's like, oh, you're going to another meeting and stuff like that. So I definitely have tried to get back a little bit of the family time, particularly, with my kids being in a really nice age where you want to hang out with your kids and they're super fun and smart and they don't hate you yet. So you have to make choices about what you do. And I think all of us, number one, we all do subspecialty practices. So it's going to be hard to do, have a meaningful academic career if you don't have a subspecialty practice. And then like what Andy said, I mean, he's really super subspecialized. For me, I let go of elbow. I stopped taking call as soon as I could, as soon as that was financially feasible. That really helped to to have energy and time to do all of the academic things. I worked really, really hard to get a geographically narrow practice. So now, my maximum commute is like 5 minutes, and that really helps because I never have to worry about traffic. I know I can really be very strict about time scheduling and time blocking. And I think that helps to have set periods of time, every morning from X to X, I'm going to be in front of the computer and working on non-clinical things. But it definitely gets harder.
How do you do that time blocking? Calendar or how do you?
Calendar, yeah.
You say this is for this time.
Correct. Yeah. And just try to give myself, you got to get X done in X amount of time. And
you work
I could be more disciplined about that, but that's helps.
How about days, number of weeks that you work? Do you work 5 days a week?
So my clinical practice, is 5 days a week, 2 clinic, 3 surgery. And, surgery day, if you get done on time, 3 to 4-ish on a surgery day, then you get a couple hours. If you use that time well. Friday afternoon, that's like key. If you can use that instead of, doing something fun. I almost always work one weekend day, and I almost always get up at 4:30-ish, even on the weekends, and try to knock out some work.
Yeah.
So, that kind of stuff, if you don't, like Burkhardt always said, had a sleep when you're dead mentality, and, nights and weekends, that's when all this stuff gets done. But that really catches up with your health if you're not careful. And, particularly as you get into the heart of middle age, if you don't sleep enough and exercise and take care of your stuff, you pay the price at some level.
There's data on that. I don't know if you guys know that study over the age of 45, I believe if you're working over 50 hours a week, your heart risk mortality was like 20% or something, especially in men. Yeah. Yeah. Andy, how about you? How many days a week?
I work 5 days a week. I do 2 clinics, 3 ORs.
Yeah,
so it's constantly evolving, though, I'll say. As I get more, it's weird. I'm a better surgeon now than I was 5 years ago, than I was 10 years ago. I'm faster, I'm better. So I'm doing more volume in shorter period of time. And so I think it is condensing. When I get home, I really try not to do work at all. And this is kind of a perverse incentive, but I don't care. I love when I get cancellations. I'm like, yeah, I got to get this done. And I'm just like, I'm going to work on my talk. I'm going to do this. I know it's like financially good, but like cancel it, no problem. And then that kind of works out. So I try to do that during the week. Weekends, 3. I took a lot of hard call for 5-6 years, rotting femurs and things like that. And then don't have very serious call now, infections here and there, but not like it used to be. And that's very helpful as well. And working out, I agree. Try and work out 3 to 4 days a week. And it's important.
John, you take any time off for research, or you integrate it as well?
It just integrates. It's not really time off. I think it just kind of happens. I'm not going 5. I'm really 2 days OR, 2 days office. My Friday is a half day, and it's a light day. I'm there. If I'm there, half the time. I think in the probably next 6 months, I'm probably going to drop my Friday. I just hired my current fellow, so she's going to be kind of growing her practice, and I'm going to probably try to push more to try to build her practice over time. I think Fridays will probably drop off for me. I mean, look, for Fridays we're gone once a month for something with a meeting or academic or design or something along those lines. It's probably on average 1.5 times a month, because some months it's 2, some months it's 1. If you're on the academic circuit, which all of us are, we're going to have that pay the price. I'm starting to say no to a lot more than I ever have in the past. It's definitely I've hit my saturation point where I'm starting to lose the things that I love. And so it happened a couple of years ago where I started to say, all right, it's more important for me to be with family, those things, that extra meeting that I've gone to for 20, almost 15 years, let's just say. I don't need to be there. I'm not really needed that much. It's that essentialism concept that, I gave a talk at Shoulder 360 2 years ago that was all about that, where I had that sort of midlife moment. I drive more now than I ever did, and I use that time effectively. So it used to be I would sit in my driveway finishing a call, and it would drive my family berserk because they knew I was home, but I wasn't home. And I was so not available. So now I schedule my call for the moment I get in my car. I got 45-minute drive. That's my call. When I get home, I'm out, I'm done. I'm walking in. The dogs, dog more than kids these days are greeting me at the door. But at least, but at least, I'm being noticed, and everybody knows I'm home and available and I'm present.
I like these sat in the car. I mean, one of the best tips of advice I ever heard for family is, don't walk in with the phone on in your hand when you go in. You got to go in and just give them a hug and, look them in the eye, right? Because it says that you're there, something else is more important than them. How about let's talk about just practical advice. If you had to give, your top 1 or 2 tips, somebody starting in practice, they're interested in what we're talking about, what's the biggest thing you would do, Rob?
Great, that's a great question. I'll say something which I didn't know, and I don't know, may or may not be surprising, but in terms of a lot of people who are interested in academic things want to parlay that into industry partnerships and doing consulting work and things like that, which is, I think, great and good. And, our industry partners are like a big part of what we can do in orthopedic surgery. So, but Mark Frankel made this comment to me like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And he said, why didn't you ever, do consulting work with DJO? Why didn't you want to work with us? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't know that's how it worked. Like that I was supposed to like ask, like just say I wanted to, I always like thought that, I must be asked. And so so a lot of, I mean, you have to have initiative for it. And that goes with everything that we've been saying about research, collecting outcomes and things like that. But in terms of like the industry piece of it, which I think a little bit goes along with an academic life, like you have to put yourself out there and ask to do low level work, med ed, do a good job at all those things. And that I think helps with all of it.
Yeah. Andy?
I would say, number 1, decide whether you really love it.
Mm-hmm.
If you love it, do it. If you're just doing it because you think you should do it, then you shouldn't do it. Number 2, collect data. But I think it's really hard to collect data on everything. Choose 1 or 2 topics. Like I'm going to do a lot of volume of rotator cuff repairs, collect on rotator cuff repairs and start collecting your data right away. You have so much of an advantage now with all the technology we have. We didn't have that before. Choose, Aubert, Patient IQ, whatever you want, and just start doing it. And then it'll reap the benefits later. So that's what I would say. And then eventually pay money out of your pocket, hire a research assistant once you get that data or you need to put that data in.
Nice. John, how about you? I heard you say
I'd say my advice is really on, if you believe in it, you want it, create the culture right out of the gate, and then don't collect as much as I do. I think I over collect data. I think you could probably pick a few things to put in a survey, and just don't. I think the data we have is limited by survey fatigue. A lot of times patients don't necessarily believe in the surveys that they're being asked. Half the time my patient's like, I don't know how to answer these questions.
Yeah.
So pick and choose what you want to collect so that it's not a burden to your patients and to your practice, and then create that culture. And that would be my advice. If I could, it's hard to go back and change that now because now I have all this data, and once I start collecting less, I can't ever compare what I had before. So I'm kind of stuck. What you start collecting, it's hard to change what you collect. So pick just a few things that matter to you. It's probably going to be specific to what type of practice you have. If it's more sports, it might be one thing versus more arthroplasty. And then you create a culture around it. And if you care, you're going to do it. If you don't care, it's going to, then they're probably not listening to this entire webinar.
Hey, Pat, can I say one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
So we're all shoulder nerds, and, Codman is like our North Star for, the original shoulder surgeon and the idea of collecting outcomes and doing research, and that he's always inspired me with that, the end result idea. We should be assessing the results of our surgeries to see if they work, and if they don't, why not? And so I think for me, that's driven me a lot I want to really know, honestly, how good am I doing? How good are my patients doing? I want to capture that, document it, see what's working, what's not. And I think if you're motivated in that way, it really helps to drive creating the culture, making the investments, all the things that John and Andy have been saying. And if that turns into publications and academic prestige and all of these other things, then that's great. And you never know where the next, like, that's another thing Codman said. Some shoulder surgeon in San Antonio or Medford, Oregon, doesn't have to be a prestigious academic place to have meaningful information can come from anywhere if you're paying attention and doing that work.
Yeah, especially in today's world. What about the doc who's, they're in their mid 40s, early 50s, they're bored, and they come to you and they're like, hey, I want to get involved now. And you might want to say, well, yeah, you're bored because now you're just doing that and you should have been doing research. But how do you advise them?
It's kind of like,
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
I haven't had that yet. Most of the people who are looking for research are young and hungry. They're not in their early career. They haven't started their career.
I'm talking about the doc who's in practice and they're like, I've kind of gotten to this point where I'm busy, but I'm looking for something more. I want to get involved in research and industry, and their kids are pretty Gene.
I would say the original question is really decide, is this really what you want to do? Or you just, it's kind of like the malunion that comes in or the non-union that comes in after 5 years. And you're like, why are you coming in now? Like, there's something off here. Like, if they truly were like, look, I've always wanted to do it. I just couldn't do it. Now I have the time. Yeah. Just do all the things that I would say that we were talking about. Like, decide whether you want to do it, collect data, make it part of your culture, but it is going to be a culture shift. If you're ready to pivot, do it.
Well, I would say that, we haven't talked any about professional societies in this, which is to me, a big part of the life of academic surgery, whether you're in private practice or, in a major research institution. And, I think there's always room for mid-career surgeons who haven't gotten involved in professional societies to do that, because there's tons that the wisdom of, mid to late career is irreplaceable. I mean, I wish that I had the wisdom of somebody in practice 20 to 30 years. So can always give back to the community in that way. And I think that's low bar entry. You don't have to have a research machine to join ASCS and be on committees and do medical education and all of those things. So that'd be my advice.
I'll tell you, I'll leave you guys.
There's a question that somebody asked.
Okay. what I would like to know, if it's only in academic practice that teaches fellows, how do you manage the surgical teaching at OR, only assisting and performing certain parts of the procedure, the entire procedure, any tips in advance? So how do you guys teach the fellows? It's a little bit different because it's a little bit clinical. I mean, that's a kind of a, tough balance. I'll just answer quickly because we got to wrap it up. Highly dependent on the fellow skill. It's graduated over time. And what I try to do is I try to not go beginning to end. I try to break it down into parts. Okay, total shoulder. Let's focus on approach this case. The next case, it's glenoid. The next case, it's humerus, and make sure they're getting all those skills. In my environment, we are, very busy. So we try to, keep that efficiency. That's how I do it. Last story, Steve Burkhardt actually on his 40th birthday went to his wife, sat down, told his wife what a failure he was. He hadn't done any research. And she said, why don't you do something? And he didn't start doing it till he was 40. I think prior to that, he had one or two applications. So you can start late. Obviously, he worked very, very hard. But I think if somebody's really motivated, there's potential. And I want to thank everybody for jumping on. Those are great insights. And hopefully people got something out of this. And if nothing else, got motivated to integrate research into their practice. It's a really valuable thing to do. All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you. I'm more motivated. That was great.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Terrific job.
Good to see you.
All
Have a
right.
great
See ya.
night. Thanks so much, everyone.